Hello everybody, and welcome, and thank you for coming to our annual Arbor Day tree planting celebration. My name is Matt Einhauser. I'm the Natural Resources Manager for the City of Rochester Hills, and we're here at the museum today to plant a tree not only in honor of Arbor Day, but also in honor of the 200th year celebration of Stony Creek Village. And so we also have Brownie Troop 77194 here to help us with the planting. Hopefully we can dodge the rain a little bit and get the planting done after this. But before that, if you guys want to come up and do the Pledge of Allegiance, we'd appreciate that. Thank you guys, that was awesome. So this is our 33rd year that we will be celebrating Arbor Day and being recognized as a Tree City USA community, and our 8th year getting a growth award for going above and beyond the requirements of Tree City USA program. And so what that means is to become a Tree City USA community, we got to do a couple main things. One being have an Arbor Day celebration like we're doing right now, and have a proclamation for Arbor Day. The others is have a forestry division or department, which we do. We have 3 full-time arborists, having a budget to be able to have a forestry program and support our forestry operations. And then also we have a tree conservation ordinance in our city to help guide the community in preserving and enhancing our community canopy. So we will be planting a black walnut today, which is a native tree to Michigan and has some historic ties to the museum grounds. And Pat McKay, the museum manager, will be coming up here as well to talk a little bit more about that in just a bit. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Mayor Barnett, who is going to say a couple words and read the proclamation for Arbor Day.
Hey. Good afternoon, everyone. I know I just heard the most enthusiastic Pledge of Allegiance I've heard in a really long time. And then I said, good afternoon, and it was completely quiet. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the Rochester Hills Van Hoosen Museum. We're so happy that you're here, and here on a very special day for Arbor Day. We celebrate Arbor Day each and every year all around the city. Many of us have done this for a long time. And there are trees all across the city planted specifically on this day, just like you will help us do in a few minutes, for many decades in the past to honor and recognize the importance, in particular, that trees play in our community. Now, since I have the mic, I wanted to say a couple things, because especially looking at our audience today, I'm really glad that we are joined by brownies here, because you all are young girls looking to become young leaders, either in your home or your family or your church or your school or your community. And I always think it's really important to point out how this community was founded really by strong women. Some of them are, one of them is here, Sarah Taylor Van Hoosen, Bertha Van Hoosen, and Sarah Van Hoosen Jones. Those 3 women really are probably the most important people in the history of Rochester Hills. And so our community really owes its success to 3 amazing women leaders who really kind of crafted our future. So if you get a chance before you leave today, read a little bit about each of them, because they are super fantastic, incredible, trailblazing women. And like I said, it's very rare to have a community really founded by women, especially back in that day, and they were incredible. Pat might tell you a little bit more about them. But today we're here to celebrate and talk about something that's very important to me, and you don't always think about it until maybe you're in a place that you don't see a lot of trees. And we're very blessed in the city of Rochester Hills to have a beautiful tree canopy. We value the trees here. We work really hard to protect them, and that's one of the reasons a lot of times when people say they like living in the city of Rochester Hills, a lot of times they mention things like nature and the ability to get into parks where there are lots of trees, or along trails where there are lots of trees. And so it's important that we do what we're doing today, which is one, stop for a minute, one day a year, and recognize how important trees are for us, for our environment, for the animals that live in and around them. But also to make sure that we're talking about what we can do to protect and preserve them. Everyone who comes here today is going to leave with a tree to plant. So not only can you help us plant the tree on the museum property, but hopefully you'll take this seedling and plant it somewhere in your yard. Maybe ask your parents first so you don't plant it in a weird spot that's problematic, but we love it. And we hope that you'll take pictures of yourselves planting those trees and passing on, certainly to your generation and to your friends and family, how important trees really are. We do a lot, as Matt was mentioning. We have a whole group of people in our city. They're in the back, whose entire job, you know what their job is? To take care of our trees. Actually, from our old forestry division, raise your hand for all of you guys and ladies that are back there that are a part of that. Jonathan, Dave. They're part of our natural resources division, but they used to be called our forestry team, and their job is to go around, look at the trees that we have in this city, look at those that are healthy and how we can plant more healthy trees, look at those that are sick and find out what we need to do to fix them. There's always bugs and things and disease that we have to be careful of, and sometimes we have to spray and keep an eye on those trees. And then we want to see really what trees are growing, what makes a beautiful tree canopy, and they do an expert job at making sure we have a great situation here in the city of Rochester Hills. So on Arbor Day, first of all, thank you for being here. Second of all, thank you for helping us plant a tree like we'll do in a few minutes. Thirdly, thank you for telling your friends how cool planting trees really are. And finally, before you go, why don't you shake one of the hands of the people in the back whose job it is to protect those trees that we love so much in our community. All right? And I will now read a proclamation honoring National Arbor Day, April 28th, 2023. It says, whereas the citizens of Rochester Hills value the trees and woodland resources that enhance our city's beauty, and whereas the annual celebration of Arbor Day provides an opportunity for individuals and communities nationwide to recognize the valuable, healthy community trees serve many positive purposes, and whereas trees purify air, produce oxygen, conserve soil and water by reducing stormwater runoff, reduce heating and cooling costs for our buildings, moderate air temperature, and provide food and shelter to wildlife. And whereas trees enhance the economic vitality of a business area, adding beauty to our neighborhoods and city, and our renewable resources providing us with paper and wood for many useful purposes, now therefore be it resolved that I, Brian Barnett, Mayor of the City of Rochester Hills, hereby proclaim Friday, April 28th, as National Arbor Day. And be it further resolved that I encourage all citizens to join the Brownies and celebrate Arbor Day by planting trees to enjoy the beauty and pleasure that they provide. Signed and sealed this day of April. Congratulations to the Brownies and all of you celebrating today. Let's give all of you a round of applause. And I'll turn the microphone now over to Pat McKay. Pat?
Thanks everyone for coming out here today. We appreciate it. We love our buildings. We love Brownies. We love all the history that's in our properties and all. And usually we focus on our buildings so much and the stories and the programs and the events that happened here. But a big part of our story is the landscape and what it looked like when the Van Hoosen family was living here. So we have to realize in Stony Creek Village, the first settlers arrived in spring of 1823. So like on a day like today. Can you imagine? That means that they would have been in a covered wagon for about 2 months, traveling from upstate New York. They had come on the Erie Canal. They had got into Lake Erie, but they couldn't travel all the way to Detroit. They had to get out around Toledo, come through the Great Black Swamp, overland to Detroit. And then they couldn't penetrate all the way here because the woods were so thick. They had to go up to Mount Clemens, follow the Clinton River all the way into an area that today we call it Rochester. From Rochester, they were steered to a valley outside of town where the Stony Creek ran. And this is where they came. They came down the hill from that valley where the old Stony Creek Cemetery is, and they looked at this valley. They did that in 1822. They moved here in 1823. So this year, we're celebrating 200 years of the family coming here. When I look around and I say, I wonder which trees were here when they came 200 years ago, probably none of them. They needed those trees to build their houses. So we had log cabins that were here. We had a schoolhouse. We had a post office. We had a church. We had all kinds of residential homes. But right after that, they started planting trees back because they knew how valuable those were. Bertha Van Hoosen's one of our favorite people because we can talk about what she was like when she was a little girl. And at one point, you have to realize all these characters that we talk about here were all your age at one point. And so Bertha Van Hoosen writes about what it was like growing up on this farm and being in the same spot where we are. And she loved plants and she loved trees. And this is what she wrote in her book. She said, "The first wild fruit to ripen was the mandrake, resembling a yellow plum. Chokecherries, the wild crab apple, the mealy red thorn apple, and sour wild grapes followed. After the fruit came the nut season, when butternut, black walnuts, hickory nuts, hazelnuts, beech nuts, and a few chestnuts in privately owned gardens could be gathered. Father owned a 20-acre woodlot in an adjoining county, and so many walnuts and hickory nuts grew there that he would have been able to market them, but for the marauding excursions made every fall by the townspeople in neighboring cities, which means people came and took all the walnuts that were on the ground. Gathering wildflowers and fruit, hunting birds' eggs, and fishing for tadpoles and snails in stagnant pools kept me climbing trees and wandering up hill and down dale." Does that sound familiar to what the kids like this do today? Sounds like it. "Botany and horticulture, as well as ornithology and entomology, were not words in my country vocabulary. Nevertheless, through Alice's instruction, a foundation was laid in those branches of science that proved to be of use in later years. She taught me how to gather, press, dry, and preserve the wildflowers for a herbarium." She loved the trees. She knew every single one of them. And in our silo, right around the corner here, we have a display. And you can push the buttons and see if you can understand the same flowers that Bertha Van Hoosen found when she was here. The other thing is her niece, Sarah Van Hoosen Jones, lived on this farm her entire life. And she said, "In the yard under the elm tree or in the grove, many picnics have taken place." And she's talking about the grove of black walnuts, and that's where we're going to plant the black walnut today. It says, "I presume those of the Washington Farmers Club were the first, followed by family reunions of the Taylor clan, and later by other groups, such as patriotic societies of which we were members. As already remarked, we were glad to have a house, the proportions of which could accommodate groups from 25 to 100. So that's in the Van Hoosen farmhouse right across the street. We found that we could serve full meals to as many as 75 and hold teas and receptions for larger numbers. So the dream house was not and has not been a place for the family's enjoyment, but rather we have tried to share our pleasure, given that many people treading on them on the Chinese rugs after 35 years are wearing well, and the black walnut floors with the continuous polishing are growing darker and more pleasing." So black walnuts were a big part of our operation here. The black walnut that we're planting today replaces a black walnut that was hit by lightning. It was the tallest tree on our property, and about 20 years ago it was hit by lightning, and it was totally, completely destroyed. And we were so nervous after we saw that we put lightning rods on all of our buildings to make sure that nothing would ever happen to our buildings. And I always said, someday I have to plant a black walnut again. And part of that story, and our forestry team that the mayor talked about, they're my heroes. You know, at one point, if we wanted a sugar maple, I could go to Bourdines or Wiegand's or find, you know, a couple of different nurseries and get a sugar maple. They're pretty easy to get. A black walnut tree, they've been scouring for weeks and for months. And this one was shipped to us from Cleveland, Ohio. And it came on a big giant semi-truck yesterday, Dave, or the day before, I think. And a big giant tractor had to pick it up. It's big with a ball and burlap on the bottom of it. And there are heroes who'd be able to find it because we were specific. It had to be a black walnut. It's not, because it's not the most popular tree that you'll see, but it's really important as part of our landscape. When Sarah Van Hoosen Jones was a little girl, most of the trees around our gazebo were gone. And her grandfather, in 1892, when she was born, her grandfather started planting trees in honor of his brand new granddaughter. So he did that in 1892. And so now you can see what happens when the seedlings you're going to take today, if you give it 100 years, they grow into big giant trees like you see out there today. So it's really an interesting, opportunity, I think, to plant to grow back. And I think over the last 30 years, we probably have planted about 35 trees in our property, trying to go back to the way it looked when the Van Hoosen family was living here. So, and this is a public park. Anybody can come here. We want you to enjoy it. You can come anytime you want. As part of our ceremony today, I do want to recognize Nick Kunzman's in the back of the room. Nick, if Nick can wave his hand. Nick's family has donated funds for us to plant this tree. He's doing it in honor of his father. His father went to elementary school in Rochester. He went to middle school. He went to high school. They live in a house that almost overlooks our property down here. And this was an important, he was a woodworker. He was a carpenter, and so was Nick in the same business. He's a Michigan State graduate and loves working with wood. And so a black walnut kind of fits right in. So we're planting this tree in memory of his father too. So we'll thank Nick. Nick, why don't we give you a round of applause too for your family. So thank you very much. This will be a great way to recognize your father for hundreds and hundreds of years. This tree is going to grow up. And the happiest animals around here now that we're planting a black walnut are the squirrels. We have more squirrels than anybody else. And I would say the only person I know of who's spent probably 30-some years on our property is Lauren. Lauren can raise her hand. Lauren was a little girl, and she lived right here in the village, still does. And she would come down here as a little girl, and every time there was a wedding, she would take down all the decorations in the gazebo to get ready for her wedding someday. And I said, Lauren, it's going to be about 25 years. And sure enough, she ended up getting married, and now her daughter lives here too. And so Lauren has been here, and her son is here too. So Lauren is a sixth generation of the family to be here too. So we really appreciate it. Lauren knows our grounds as well as I think anybody. In fact, you met your husband in the front yard playing flashlight tag, as I recall. So that's how important our grounds are. For some families, their roots go really deep. But we do have exhibits in here where we talk about the flora and fauna, the plants and the animals and the butterflies. Bertha Van Hoosen named all of them. She learned their scientific name. And when she became a surgeon, her picture is right back here, when she became a surgeon and had to learn all these Latin names, she already knew Latin because her sister was a teacher of Latin, and she had learned them through the scientific names of all the plants and animals. It led right into her career as a medical doctor. So all of a sudden now, the plants that you see and the trees around here had launched somebody into their whole career. So it's just a remarkable story. We're really glad to share it.